So the last two functions here I'm going to stick together that any and all computers actually undertake is process and store. We can see that here on pages 63 through 68. And the first thing I'll tell you is that computers of any sort do not just have one processor, right? Most, and I'll call them consumers, are concerned with the main processor, and that's the CPU, the central processing unit. That is usually Intel or AMD, and the speed of those is measured in gigahertz, right? So the higher, the better. And that's all well and true. That is the central processing unit. But that requires that there are other processors around it to do more specialized tasks. So for everybody, I suggest that a GPU or a graphics processing unit is important. Whether or not you're gaming or you're just doing, simple around the web browsing, the more you have dedicated to graphics, the better all of those things are going to behave. GPU are measured in gigabytes. Hopefully they're measured in gigabytes. You can still find GPUs that are like 512 megabytes, and those really are not considered fast GPUs. Fast GPUs are like 6 and 8 and above gigabytes. So if you find yourself in the 1 to 2 gigabytes or 3 gigabyte range, you're just fine for most not high-end gaming tasks, and you're certainly fine for most not high-end, photo and editing and movie watching and stuff like that tasks. Next, there's an ALU, which is the arithmetic and logic unit. This has other separate, smaller processors on it that actually just do math. They are responsible for crunching the code that everybody else is using. There are sound processors that clearly processes the sound. There are other dedicated video processors aside from the graphics processor. Clearly those are for video. And there are many more on any particular computer. And you can actually read what some of those are here between 63 and 64. Next on 65, just something I do want to make mention of, and it's the upper right-hand corner here on 65. It's how many cores does your computer have. It is not uncommon for tablets and smartphones to have single-core processors on the low end. It's unusual that you'll see the central processing unit be a single core any longer. Most are dual core that are worth anything, as far as can I get real work done here. Shoot at the minimum for a dual core processor. And essentially you can see in the figure there, 2.33, all that means is how many it's called a thread. How many instructions can a processor handle at one time? There are quad-core processors. That means they can handle 4. There are 6 and 8-core processors, which means they can handle 6 or 8 simultaneous processes. But that's not of huge import most of the time. The bigger bottleneck here is going to actually be your software. Most software is only written to use 1 or 2 of your processing cores. So you can go out there and buy the most expensive computer that you could possibly stomach. And if all you're going to do is run Mail and Chrome and a couple of really low impact programs, it's never probably going to use more than 1 core or 2 every so often. So don't get caught up in that idea of, 2 versus 4 cores, which is better. Sure, more cores usually people feel like that's the better, but you really need to ask yourself, this is that nuance again from one of the previous podcasts, is what kind of software am I really going to be using? If you're really going to focus in on just the basic stuff, Mail, Outlook, Excel, Word, iTunes, whatever, two cores, a dual core with a high clock speed, so very fast, is probably fine. If you're going to do a lot of graphic intensive work and you know you're going to be in the Adobe Creative Suite and you know you're going to be with, Premiere Pro all the time, yeah, go ahead and look at that quad-core processor with a high-end graphics processing unit GPU. But if you're not, save the money and, get something that'll last a little longer. Get something more disposable. Save a ton of money and go in that direction. They're a measure of speed, cores are, but they're not the only one. Finally comes storage that we can see here on page 55. And I believe 56 here. Yeah. There's really three kinds here to be concerned with. What we see here in figure 2.34 is the old-fashioned traditional platter-based hard disk media, HDD hard drives. Essentially what that is like a little record. There's actually a needle, there's actually a little plastic plate in there that can be written to lots of times. The good news about these is they're incredibly inexpensive. You can get 4 terabytes as of today for under $100. So that's a lot of stolen music and movies. The problem with these is they're really slow. So that's not necessarily something you want your operating system or your big programs to live off of. But it's probably fine if you've just got movies or media sitting on them, things like music. Solid-state drives are the next big increase here. I will tell you, solid-state drives, if you have a little bit older of a computer, a solid-state drive is a huge increase in the performance on that. I am looking right here at my old iMac. I have this thing has to be 6 years old. It has a 5400 RPM. That's how many rates or revolutions per minute the traditional hard drive spins. And that's 5400 RPM, which is tremendously slow. I run the Adobe Creative Suite and a whole bunch of other things on there. I always have GarageBand. I always have Adobe Audition up. I've got a bunch of stuff on there. And it used to take upwards of 10 minutes to get me signed in. I cheaped out because I'm I'm going to use the word frugal here. I'm cheap. I cheaped out and I just have a solid state drive literally taped to the back of my iMac with a $3 cable that connects it. So it's not really safe, but it's never going to travel anywhere. That, cheapest the law will allow, external solid state drive runs 4 times faster than... nope, I'm doing the math wrong. That's 11. That's 11 times faster than that particular hard-based media. It takes under a minute from a cold, dead start to be at my desktop with all of my programs ready for me to go. That's a huge, huge jump in speed. There is also NVMe, which stands for very, very, very fast media. The problem is you really need to know if you have a computer that can even support the kinds of speeds there for that. As a matter of fact, it is not referenced here in the text, which I do feel is a little bit of a shortcoming. But NVMe, N as in not, V as in very, M as in much, and E is, I'm kidding, it's fast as hell. NVMe is incredibly fast, and if you have a machine that can handle it, that's really going to make a tremendous amount of difference as to the overall feel of speed you have on your machine. I do want to mention here is online storage is absolutely positively fantastic. If you have an iDevice, an iOS device, an iPhone, an iPad, you have 5 gig of free iCloud storage. That's great. Google has their own product. It's called Google Drive. It's fantastic. I actually pay $3 a month for 250 additional gigabytes of online storage through Google Drive, and it's worth every penny. But you get 10 gigabytes if you don't want to pay for that. OneDrive, a perfectly acceptable Microsoft product, is also free. You get 5 gigabytes through them. If you hook up your student at rockvalleycollege.edu address through there, you get 15 gigabytes. But let me warn you, as soon as you are no longer a student, that account goes dark, which means it's impossible to get your data back off of there. If you're going to use OneDrive, please sign up for a @live.com account or an @outlook.com account and be able to get your stuff off of there. There are many more cloud-based storage options, and I have a link for you here under the podcast for some good free, paid, and other options via TechRadar. Just scroll right down to the free version and try them before you pay for anything.